Welcome to Mr. Biz Radio, biz talk for biz owners. During the next half hour, Mr. Biz, Ken Wentworth, a leading business advisor and two-time best-selling author, will cover topics that'll help business owners run their companies more profitably and more efficiently. If you're ready to stop faking the funk and take your business onward and upward, this show is for you. And now, here's Mr. Biz, Ken Wentworth.
All right, welcome to another episode of Mr. Biz Radio, the Mr. Biz, Ken Wentworth. And, we always, I say this all the time, but I truly mean it. We always try to come up with some different angles on different topics. Maybe we've covered before. We've been doing the show for 5+ years now, so it makes it difficult to do sometimes. But today, we were successful. We're going to have talk about something today that we have literally, we've scratched the surface on it. We've never done a show on it, though, specifically. So we're not only going to talk about some of the principles of outperforming, of doing that, right? Super important for everybody, whether you're an entrepreneur or business owner. It doesn't matter you don't even have to be a business owner or entrepreneur. Important for you as well, your corporate career, whatever it might be, your 9 to 5. But also, we're going to talk about a topic that many of you, I know I get questions about it often, and that is literally how to go from ground zero, how to go from starting a business to an IPO. An initial public offering. What are some of the steps? What are some of the things to avoid? What are some of the bumps in the road? Now, of course, super deep topic. We could talk about it for a long time. We're going to scratch the surface on it here a little bit more. But this week we're talking with Mr. Peter LeSar. Peter's gone from ground zero to IPO, hence why we're having on to talk about that. He is the #1 international bestselling author of Restaurant Strong, a study of outperformance in the restaurant industry, and especially as restaurant industry has been so heavily impacted during the pandemic. So I'm really looking forward to our talk today. As CEO and CFO, he has run large multinational private and publicly traded hospitality companies with thousands of restaurants, hotel, and real estate employees around the globe. Peter is also the founder of 2 restaurants recognized by the 50 Best in the Discovery Series. Lastly, he is an investor in restaurant, blockchain, and real estate developments. So without further ado, Peter LeSar, welcome to Mr. Biz Radio.
Ken, I'm so excited to be here. It's really an honor. You and I have spoken before, and I've been looking forward to this formal meet for quite some time. So I appreciate getting to meet your audience.
Yeah, well, and thanks for your patience with that. I know we had a little delay on our end and with some different things. So it's been, I've been looking forward to this conversation, and it's like got delayed. And I'm like, oh crap! But I'm looking forward to talking today with you. So I guess, Peter, let's get started. We always like to start with our guests talking about your entrepreneur journey. Like, how did you, evolve into the successful entrepreneur that you are now?
Yeah, that's such a great question, right? Because you really need to go back to, what started what sparked your entrepreneurial spirit, so to speak. Because I think that most of us, when we think about it, we can come back to a particular moment in time and say, we got interested in this, we got interested in that. And that moment for me started in a really strange place. I was actually 10 years old, and I was in Kabul, Afghanistan as a boy.
Oh, wow.
Yes, before the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. And I was there because my parents worked with nonprofits that were affiliated with the Department of State, and they were working on healthcare and programs for the government of Afghanistan. And so we were there for 2 wonderful years. But halfway through that experience, there was a coup d'etat when the government was toppled by a new government with a lot of violence. There was basically a war zone around our house for several days that was backed by the Soviets. And that was when the world started to change. And my entrepreneurial journey started about 2 weeks after all that aggression ended. And I walked out onto the street to this little kebab stand. And this is a kebab stand that I've been to many times in a little marketplace. And this guy who sat on a wooden platform with a deep clay oven built into the ground had a line of maybe 100 people. Okay.
Jeez.
And so you have to picture that there's rubble, there are bullet holes, there are soldiers around. It's still, people are very uncertain. And you have this guy serving kebab who'd always had a line, but I'd never seen a line that long before. Right. And what I realized in that moment is that there's something about this guy that I didn't really understand, because I'd had his kebab, I don't know, many times, and it was only sort of years later that I was able to go back and understand something that you could probably guess at today, and that is he was really serving a need beyond food, and that need was a sense for a community to come together and have a chance to speak, right, and to find out what's going on. And so there was a whole complexity of reasons people were out that you couldn't understand when you're just looking at the kebabs that he served, right? But it was in that moment that I really understood that business has some creative sides to it that weren't clear to me, right? And then sort of it went on from there, and I was very fortunate because I ended up, traveling to over 50 countries during my life, living in a number of countries during my lifetime. And so I've been able to take my journey in a lot of different directions. And that's also been a really creative pursuit. So that's where it started, but obviously it's not where it ended.
Well, I can say with certainty, Peter, that you are 100% the first guest that ever started their entrepreneurial journey in a war-torn area. That
Yeah, it was truly amazing that we can have businesses that people feel connections to for reasons that we can't understand, right? And when you understand that those connections exist, but they're sort of invisible below the surface of things, that's when you can start to find your real entrepreneurial journey. And that is, how do I understand what is going on with human needs, right? That can send me on a trajectory that others haven't seen yet, right? And that was captured in that moment. I just didn't grasp the whole thing.
Yeah, and so you may have mentioned this, I can't remember. How long did it take you to sort of figure that out? Like, was it 10 years later, 20 years later, 5 years later, where you kind of went back in time and said, man, that is where it started?
It's a great question. I think that when I first got into the restaurant business as an adult, I was able to look back on that moment and connect to that moment and say, I really started thinking about food at that point, right? And then slowly I started to realize I started thinking about food as a business at that point, right? And that was, so 10 to early 30s, really. That's a long time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, again, this week, guys, we're talking with Mr. Peter LeSar. You can find out more at peterlesar.com. That's Peter. His last name is spelled LESAR. Again, peterlesar.com. Find out more there. Check out his book. He's, as I mentioned before, international bestseller. Restaurant Strong is the name of his book. We're going to come back after the break. We'll give the Mr. Biz tip of the week, and then we are going to talk about principles of outperformance before we get into going from ground zero to IPO.
Business owners have a continually growing to-do list with little time for revenue-producing activities. With Check Off Your List and their experienced team of virtual assistants, you can focus on growing your business. Visit checkoffyourlist.com to learn how Check Off Your List's skilled team can handle your day-to-day tasks like social media, bookkeeping, calendar maintenance, and much more. Contact Check Off Your List at checkoffyourlist.com or call 888-262-1249 to see how their virtual assistants can help you live to work rather than work to live.
Thank you for listening to Mr. Biz Radio. Did you know our show airs 7 days a week for more than 30 hours now? If you are in the B2B space and would like to reach thousands of business owners every week, including our more than 250,000 social media followers, our thousands of daily internet radio listeners, our email list fans, and Mr. Biz Solutions members, email us at info@MrBizSolutions.com to become a sponsor. Tap into Mr. Biz Nation to help grow your business.
Check out both of Mr. Biz's national best-selling books, Pathway to Profits and How to Be a Cash Flow Pro on Amazon. Now, once again, here's Mr. Biz.
All right, welcome back to the show. As we always do at the beginning of the second segment, we always give the Mr. Biz tip of the week. And this week's tip, I actually have to cheat a little bit here because it is a quote from none other than Mr. Thomas Edison. I think everyone's heard of that guy. Mildly successful, right? So you might want to lean in on this one. His quote is, "Our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is always to try just one more time." And you guys have probably heard the story about when he was allegedly when he was inventing the light bulb, and it took him, they said 1,000 times to be successful. And someone asked him at one point after he had been successful with it and created the light bulb, how did you not give up? You 700 times, 800 times, 900 times you failed. And interestingly enough, and if you think about it, I thought it was interesting. He said, "I just knew that when I failed, I knew that's one other way that it won't work. So let me shift that up." And so he said, "I amassed 900 plus ways that it won't work. I had to be getting closer and closer to success, right? To achieving the result he wanted." So that is a Mr. Biz tip of the week. Keep trying, use that consistent perseverance that we always talk about to be successful. All right, Pete, let's get back into this. So we left off, you got into the restaurant industry. I want to talk a little bit more about that. What led you to writing Restaurant Strong, your book? And then into some of the other things you're into.
Well, that's a great question. Oh, sorry to interrupt, Ken. I think that what led that in that direction is over time, I was iterating in business just like Thomas Edison was in light bulbs. And I ended up putting together a venture with 5 other guys that went on to eventually go public. And that venture was a hospitality business that operated in markets in Asia and Latin America, and we ended up listing on an exchange called the Euronext in Europe. And what I discovered is that of all of our businesses, we went from 0 to 5,000 employees. Our restaurants were the hardest businesses to make money in, right? And
sure.
I think people generally understand that. But what a lot of people don't understand is it's hard even if you really understand the business quite deeply. And so I began this journey of studying leaders in the restaurant space to understand what they all seem to have in common that led to their great levels of success. And that's where I really started to see that underneath tactics and underneath strategies in all businesses, not just in restaurants, there are first principles of why some businesses rise above all others. And as soon as I understood that, I leaned into the research for literally a decade and worked on this book, which I could have done for business in general, but I felt it was needed for the restaurant space coming out of COVID-19.
Yeah, well, interesting. So I talk about this all the time, and it's actually part of my next book, which will be coming out here very soon. Is and you did it, modeling expert behavior.
Right.
When you're trying a new venture, and looking at, I'm not saying you copy what people do, but you look at, like you had mentioned, you're looking, what are the most successful restaurateurs and what do they have in common, and how can I replicate that in my business? And I talk about that all the time. I think that's so important. Is oftentimes I think folks neglect that and they try to do things on their own. They're trying to, they got the machete and they're in the forest and they're trying to cut down all this brush where there's a path over here. You could follow that path. Someone's already cut down the brush in the path.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And of course there are tactics and there are strategies, and there's then what underlies all of those that we can use to navigate more sure-footedly, right? And where I got fascinated was what is that last piece of logic below which no other explanation is required, right? What is the final why? Okay. And that's what I was looking for. And that's what these first principles are. They're really not the tactics or the strategies, but what are the principles you use to spot which tactics and strategies can be adopted for your business to drive you to to outperform competitors.
Well, that's a great segue. Let's dive into some of those principles, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I'll give you one, which is really, all of these apply to all businesses, and that's really why I'm so excited about this interview, because so I'll give you one. Let's talk about pole signs, for example. Okay, a pole sign is a sign that McDonald's might have that goes way up into the sky. We've all seen them, and they have the big golden arches set against the sky, right? And if you think about that, or you think about a Facebook ad, right, that somebody in a digital information business might use to sell a book, right, or some content, what do they have in common, right? What is underlying both of those, right? Well, the reason that the restaurateur put that sign up against the sky is because you could see it, right? There was no other clutter around. There's just the blue sky behind it, right? And so in effect, when you dig deep down, you're understanding they're trying to maximize their visibility, right? And the same thing with a Facebook ad. A Facebook ad will work if it is designed to maximize visibility, meaning it goes to the right targets, it has something in it that stops people and catches their eye, right? And it's something that people want to share on and increase the visibility of, right? And so rather than focusing on the Facebook ad or the pole sign, which are tactics or maybe strategies, depending on how much there is to them, we can understand there's a first principle of visibility, right? That says that if I am more visible to my target market than anybody else, right, then more people will recall me, and the greater the market recall of who I am, the more people will spend money with me, right? And that drives growth. And so as soon as you understand that, you can point to visibility through all aspects of our business, right? You can write a book to increase your visibility. You can host a radio show to increase your visibility. You can go on Mr. Biz radio show to increase your visibility, right? Exactly. And that we need to look at the first principle of visibility and apply it to everything we do. And when we do that effectively, when we translate that effectively, the world has a better chance of recalling us and spending money with us than if we don't focus on visibility, right? So that's the advantage of understanding the first principle, is you understand that as soon as that navigation tool is there, you can point it to your business or your life in innumerable ways, not just, oh, I want a sign. Got it? That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I agree with it 1,000%. I mean, Grant Cardone talks about best known beats best product. And he says, that doesn't mean to have a crappy product, but McDonald's is a great example. And I've mentioned this, I think, a few times on the show in the past. McDonald's, how many billions of dollars do they make every year, right? Yeah. Do people go to McDonald's because they have the best food? I mean, I would argue they might have the best French fries. Okay, I'll throw that out there. But other than that, it's not like they have organic, high quality food and everything. And nothing against McDonald's, but it's not like it's you're getting a gourmet filet at McDonald's. It's not because they have the best food. It's there everywhere. Everyone knows the golden arches. They're ubiquitous, right? You can't go past the street corner practically without seeing a McDonald's. So that visibility is real. Those golden arches, even in the movie, The Founder, Ray Kroc talks about that, of putting the golden arches up against the sky and making it like a church gathering community, like you had mentioned, even back from your early days in Afghanistan. We're running up against a break here. I apologize. I'm running out of time here. We're going to hit the break, come back, and continue talking with Peter LeSar.
Are you ready to automate your business? Automation is the key to scaling a business and building wealth. It's also one of the most difficult things for a small business owner to do on their own. If you're looking for help with automation, Pulse Technology CRM can help. We have an exclusive offer for Mr. Biz Nation. We will build everything for free, even if it's a sophisticated funnel. Visit thepulsespot.com/Mr. Biz for this exclusive offer.
If you find listening to Mr. Biz Radio is helpful, imagine having live access to not only Mr. Biz, but also 5 other trusted business experts. It's true. You can have live access to your very own CFO, plus a business attorney, a website and digital marketing expert, a sales and growth guru, a financing professional, and a customer experience master. Visit MrBizSolutions.com to learn more. Join Mr. Biz Nation at MrBizSolutions.com.
To submit questions to the show, email them to info@MrBizSolutions.com. Now, once again, here's Mr. Biz.
All right, welcome back to the show. So I apologize for that abrupt ending. Here I'm staring at the producer Alan's clock in the studio here, and I've just got ranting on the topic and completely lost my train of thought. So I apologize for that abrupt ending. Not very radio professional there. Had to cut it quick. But so Peter, look, I love, as I mentioned, I love that principle, that first principle. Maybe can we talk about maybe one more? Because I do want to get into some of the challenges with going from ground zero to IPO, and make sure we hit that as well.
Perfect. Yeah. So there's something that's called the first principle of truth, right? And so we live in this world of different truths these days in politics, for example, right? But this has existed for forever. And what we need to understand is that whoever owns the truth of something wins in the business world as well. So let me give you an example of this, right? We would say, to use your McDonald's example, that the fast food industry is really about manufactured processed food. We know that they're getting frozen patties. We know that they're getting frozen fries, right? They're made in some sort of factory over there. And so we understand that fast food comes with a processed nature to it, right? And that's a cultural truth, a belief by our society that fast food is processed. An a priori truth is the opposite of whatever everybody believes, right? And so Chipotle came along as an example and said, no, I can serve food fast with real ingredients, and introduced a new truth, right? And slowly but surely began to own that truth and convince the world that his truth was better, right? And so when you look at any hugely successful business, what they have done is they have uncovered a truth of the day that everybody believed, a cultural truth, and they have convinced everybody that that truth was wrong and that there was a better way of doing things, a new truth, right? And when you can do that and own that narrative of what is true and right, it is a first step really in going from ground zero to IPO to create that transition for you, Ken.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. And I was going to make the same transition as, as you continue to grow and scale, moving yourself towards an IPO, that's going to be a super important one as well, because I think that's a massive game changer. I mean, the key word that everyone uses, seems to use nowadays, last few years, of it's a disruptor, right? They disrupted the industry. And I think that's very true. So yeah, let's get into a little bit of that. So as you guys were growing the business and moving towards an IPO, walk us through some of those things, maybe some of the things that we should make sure we do look out for or setting ourselves up for, and maybe even some of the bumps in the road that you guys hit that you want to warn us about to make sure we steer around those.
Yeah, so I would say there are 3 fundamentals before we get into some of the more practical details. One is, if you are not out every day with a narrative that shows the world why what you're doing is abruptly more important than the traditional ways people do things, you are not going to get to an IPO. You're not going to be able to turn the world towards you. That's one, okay? 2 is, if whatever you're doing is not deeply solving specific human needs, okay, that will be a second domino. And so you need to understand very deeply, if you're McDonald's solving the need of, I'm hungry and I need to fuel up right now, right? Or you are a community restaurant, if you're in the restaurant space, solving the need of love and belonging, I want to see my community, right? So whatever business you're in, you have to be solving a particular need better than everybody else does, because only then will the market be sticky to you. Will you be able to stack up loyal customers because you have a best solution? Okay. And three, within sort of the trifecta foundational ideas we touched on from the beginning, if you're not more visible, talking about your narrative of truth and sharing your solutions with the world, then you're not going to get to be a publicly traded company. Those three are essential for any company to rise up. Okay. Now, beyond that, the most important thing you need to understand is actually, how does the world of finance really work? Okay. Because in every business sector that exists, there are pivot points when finance will get interested in you. Okay. And if you don't know what those are, you're working toward the wrong phases of development. So to track it to the restaurant industry, for example, when you have 5 to 10 restaurants of a single brand, you can now hope to attract funds or other types of institutional investors to help you to grow. But if you only have 3, they won't even take your calls, right? So in every single sector, there are pivot points when finance is interested, right? And moreover, in every single sector, there are KPIs, key performance indicators that finance is looking for, that if you don't have, they're also not going to be interested. But most of all, they are indicators of how much greater your future cash flows are going to be than everybody you compete with, right? Otherwise, if you're not building a business that is building better cash flows than everybody else in your sector, you're also not going to be able to head towards IPO. That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. And I think it's so true. And like you said, it's different in every industry, but and I think that really the bottom line for the most part is finance gets interested when they see there's enough of a body of work, of a proof of concept, that we could scale this from, as you mentioned, 5 or 10 restaurants. We could have 500 restaurants.
Right.
But at 3, it could be just really good location. There could be a lot of variables. Once you have 5 to 10 in that industry, I think they start to get their interest, and then maybe you could tell your story a little bit more, et cetera. And like you said, those break points are different for every industry.
Every industry, and they want to. It's exactly like you said. They want the concept to be proven, but they also want to see that you have done enough body of work, to use your language, Ken, that you as an owner and a manager have proven that you can walk through those types of fires and come out ahead, right, as an individual. Because they don't want to invest in a concept that's great if there is not somebody who's capable of driving it more levels, right? And if you don't have an eye, again, on what those pivot points are for finance and those basic requirements that they have, then you're aiming in the wrong direction generally, and you won't ever get on the track. So investigating that for your segment, when did ABC company become public? When did they first get funded? What was going on in their business when they first became funded? That's really critical.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Again, it goes back to what we talked about earlier, is modeling expert behavior. Find someone who's already cleared that brush in the IPO world in your industry, and look at those break points.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good stuff. Look, we've only got about a minute left, so I don't want to dive too deep into anything else. But look, go out to peterlesar.com. That's again, his last name is spelled LESAR. peterlesar.com. Check out his book, Restaurant Strong, where he talks about a lot of these outperformance principles of outperformance that we touched on a little bit in the second segment, and scratched it a little bit here in the third as well. But lots of great information in both. I didn't read the entire book, but I skimmed it when I was prepping for the interview and everything. So good stuff there. Peter, thank you so much for coming on. I feel like we could have like 5 shows on this.
And whenever you want to, I'm willing to dig deep on all these things. This book and the body of work that I've done really gives people a roadmap, not just sort of the highlights. And that's why I think the book is worthy of your readers, because they can get in and understand the how-tos of it.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome. Well, again, this week we were talking with Peter LeSar. Appreciate you guys watching as always. And don't forget, as always, cash flow is king.
This has been Mr. Biz Radio. To learn how to become part of Mr. Biz Nation, visit MrBizSolutions.com. For access to free weekly content, subscribe to the Mr. Biz YouTube channel and follow him on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. To listen to archive shows, you can find them on the Mr. Biz Solutions website.